Okay, welcome back. We're going to move on, and again we're talking in relation to the giant steps chord sequence, but basically this information is completely compatible with any chord sequence. We're going to be looking at major seventh chords, dominant seventh chords, and minor seventh chords, and obviously those are the meat and potatoes of a major 2-5-1. So Chromaticism plays a huge part in the sound of jazz. It's used in many different ways, and it's a sound that I particularly like, partly because of the smoothness it can create, but it can also be used to create a lot of tension, and it's just a really good thing to have under your fingers. And so if I'm playing on any sequence, you can be pretty sure that I'm going to be using chromaticism of some sort at some point, and most players do, to get away from that very diatonic sound. So if I play a chorus of giant steps where I play in a very diatonic fashion, and then I'll deliberately try and play more chromatically in the second chorus, and you'll just hear how different the two kind of sound worlds are. And again, that's incredibly useful because you can, again, you contrast and development and things within a solo. You can take a diatonic idea and make it more chromatic sounding, or you can take a chromatic sounding idea and bring it back to being more diatonic. Again, you get a kind of continuum of sounds and colours. So I'll try diatonic first. So what I did there was a chorus of very diatonic material, a chorus more chromatic, diatonic, chromatic. So hopefully you heard some differences there in the kind of sound world that you create. So diatonic tends to be very melodic and kind of in agreement, but the chromatic world can set up kind of some kind of moments of tension. And even if you're doing that within a chord, which I could recommend you exploring probably as a kind of first port of call. So if you have a chord shape, go back to our drop 2 B major 7th chord, you can just explore moving chromatically from one chord tone to another. So I've got chord tones here, and I can just connect those, or I can connect the 7th with the 5th down here, that kind of thing. And you could just explore on one chord how that would work and get a feel for that. And it's a really smooth and strong way of getting from one chord tone to another. And if you extend the chord up to, say, like a ninth chord, so if I was to play B major ninth, you can just connect between the chord tones. That kind of thing, and that's a kind of very kind of basic kind of guitaristic kind of chromaticism. And again, you could extend that to the other concepts that we looked at in the other videos. So the pentatonic scale, for instance. So if I was playing a B major pentatonic scale, I can just infill chromatically, a bit like the blues scale does already, but just taking that slightly further. So I could fill in between the tonic and the sixth, or between the fifth and the third, or between the ninth, and I could go all the way down to the seventh if I want. Actually, I can't go down to the seventh because it's not on the scale, but I can go down to the root. And then if I wanted to do that on the B major scale, I could take that further by, which doesn't sound anything much in itself, but again, in terms of lines, it just gives a little bit of tension when you pass through a note that's not in the chord. So if I pass through the A natural on that chord, you will just get a little bit of momentary kind of tension, and then you resolve it, and that's kind of essentially where chromaticism of this kind of basic sort stands and falls, is on your control over the resolution. So it's really about ending in a strong place, moving from a good place to another good place, but passing through somewhere with a little bit of tension on the way. And so that's a very basic way of doing it, and it's quite nice just for little embellishments here and there on the chord. So in the sequence on Giant Steps, we get, after the first part of the sequence, as I'm sure you're aware by now, which moves through key centers quite quickly, we just get a whole load of 2-5-1 progressions. 2-5 in E flat, 2-5 in G, 2-5 in B major, and back to E flat. So at those points where we actually get a whole bar on a chord, you can actually just kind of stretch out on that particular chord, and that might be a nice place to put some chromaticism in. So what I'll do is I'll play through the sequence, and at those points I'll just get a little bit chromatic, not outrageously so, but just do a little bit of fill. So I'll play diatonically and then chromatically when the chord comes to rest for a whole bar. So you get the idea that when it has the kind of a kind of smoothing out kind of quality, but within that smoothness there's an element of kind of tension. But if you start a chromatic line, it tends to lead the listener's ear in that direction. So it's a really good device of getting from one place to another, but also from one chord to another. And like we said in the previous video of looking at lines from one chord to another, you can, if you then use chromaticism, you can take that situation even further, and you can get some really smooth lines between one chord. And there's lots of other ways that you can use chromaticism, chromatic patterns, looking at moving larger patterns around chromatically, all that kind of thing. It's a pretty huge kind of study in itself, and it's really worth kind of transcribing some examples from say Pat Metheny or Pat Martino or Michael Brecker or Bob Berg, of people using that. It's a really kind of important part of the language, and as well as just kind of using the chromatic scale, you can play connecting phrases between pentatonics, which is something that I quite like to do. So if I have a pentatonic shape, say we're talking about our F sharp major pentatonic on the B major 7th chord, I might, instead of just moving from those shapes, I might connect little fragments of the scale, just connect them with some chromatic movement. Gets you from one place to the other, but also has that kind of that element of tension in the in the lines, which I particularly like. And you can move again as you get more advanced in looking at the application of pentatonics on chords. Then you can move from one pentatonic scale to another. So rather than moving within the one pentatonic scale like I did there, moving from one to the other. So if I wanted to play on say the E flat major 7th chord, which happens fairly early on, I can play an E flat pentatonic scale, but I could also play an F pentatonic scale, which will give me the sharp 11 sound. So I can play that, but I can play those sounds independently, but I can also connect them chromatically, which is quite nice. So I'll try and do a bit of that in this next example. So a little bit, I was kind of forcing the issue there, but it was kind of, you can see the potential for that in terms of that kind of being able to free up chromatically on things, and probably you can hear that kind of thing in coming from kind of players that have influenced me a lot, like Pat Martino, Pat Metheny, John Scofield, all that kind of stuff. So it's very much part of the kind of modern vocabulary, but more on that next time. Thank you.